Jordan, do you know who I really need to know more about in book 4 and 5 of the series?
Who? Drake?
Broccoli. We need more broccoli. Like, we need to know broccoli's story. Is broccoli going to get a glow up? I feel like broccoli is going to grow up. He's going to get bigger. He's going to be like some kind of big weapon. Like, broccoli's story is not done.
So it's funny that you say this because I feel totally the opposite. And we'll go into this a little bit more later because the objects I think are important. But the thing that jumps out to me is like on this entire book tour that we've been watching Rebecca go on, it's like she's shocked that everybody feels the type of way about broccoli. She's like, this is just a cat. So either she's like shocked that we caught on or care about something so early, or she's like, I had no plans for this cat. Because like somebody asked her if broccoli were to wield a signet, what it would be. And she was like, it's a cat.
So funny. No, I think she's keeping it on the DL. Broccoli's gotta glow up. It's coming. I need more broccoli.
Honestly, so funny.
Can you imagine being a cat and you're just flying on a dragon?
Dude, like, yeah, like, did they put him in a basket? I honestly, my main thought about broccoli out of all the things that people have brought up is like, how did they transport broccoli? How was broccoli fed? When did broccoli go to the bath? Like, you know what I mean? Like, my brain went into like, how would I care for this cat?
Who is taking care of broccoli? Who is making
Does he have a litter box? Do they have litter boxes?
True. No, because he's magical cat. He doesn't go to the bathroom.
I mean, where is he at in Basgiath? Is he in, like, are they just dormant together?
We don't know.
Is he roaming?
Can people in this world also be allergic to cats? Like, is there someone allergic to broccoli? We don't know.
How did the dragons and the griffins interact with the cat? Who got the cat? Drake, right?
Yes.
The irony that I said Drake.
The irony. You know who I actually forgot Drake. So thank you for sharing that name.
You know, well, because there's a lot of tee up, and I'm interested to see if you feel this way, that they're trying to say that there's like a romance budding between Mira and Drake on the table.
I mean, I'd be down for, but
Do you though?
No. I just want Mira to be happy. So if she falls in love and she's happy, that's better than what the alternative is.
I just hope everybody has fun.
Exactly. Especially Mira. Can she get a break? Dude,
I'm gonna break your heart right away. Do you wanna let's introduce ourselves and then I'll break your heart after?
No. Okay.
I'm Jordan.
And I'm Sheridan.
And together we're Sippin on Spice podcast.
Yes, and today we are doing part 2 of our Onyx Storm episode by Rebecca Yarros. If you have not listened to part 1, please go and do so before listening to part 2. It's going to be a continuation of that episode, and we are so excited to get into more topics and theories on this amazing book.
Yes, and I'm going to kick it off with a heartbreaking one, okay?
Ooh,
and it is...
Okay.
I have been telling you, if you go back and listen to our Fourth Wing episode, if you go back and listen to our Iron Flame episode, I have told you this time and time again, my prediction, and I believe it now even more. Rebecca told us on this book tour, we are going to lose someone we love in the next book. I'm telling you, it's Mira. And the reason I believe that is because I think that her death has to be the catalyst for something huge. And I think, I don't know if it's going to unlock this crazy power in Violet, which we can get into. I don't know what it's going to do, right? Because we saw how close this got to breaking her. Because I even thought, honestly, when I got to that part in Onyx Storm where they were holding her, they slit her throat. I thought, I mean, I was sad. Don't get me wrong. I love Mira. I was sad. But my initial thought was, wow, I didn't think they'd do that this early. I think it is a book 4, maybe book 5, but based on what she's saying, I'm thinking it is a book 4 ending for us. We are gonna get this Mira death.
I am heartbroken, but I also think you're kind of right, because I think if we talk more about Violet's power and the trajectory, I do think it's going to be a catalyst for Violet. It's going to unlock something in her that she can't undo. And I think that I agree with you. Mira is going to be a catalyst, but I don't want that. Like I said, if she falls in love with Drake and she is a happily ever after, that's preferable.
We got Cat and Trigger only for Trigger to get taken away. So it's like
heartbreaking.
It's like it doesn't give me any faith in these love couples staying together, staying alive for each other. To me, right? If we look back on every time Violet's power has manifested and manifested strongly, she always even acknowledges it is linked to emotion. It's why the famous "should I get the wing leader"
Yeah.
line is even out there, right? Because she could only channel the lightning through this crazy emotion. What would she do if she lost somebody, the only person that she's meant to trust? And also, Mira still has a purpose to serve. Let's not forget about that. It is like pounded into our head in this book, in my opinion, right? Which is as she's getting upset about her Asher leaving all of the books to Violet and Violet being the only one to get it. And Asher keeps telling her, you know, only trust Mira, only trust Mira. We have bookshop keeper. She tells us clearly, I wonder what your mom was grooming you for. We know these parents have been grooming, okay? We know back in Iron Flame that General Sorrengail is grooming Violet to not go into the scribes for a reason. There is something that Mira has been groomed for that we don't know yet.
And I think that's also, I agree with you. I think it's interesting too, also because her name I think is Theophany, but quick side note, when I was reading it, I read it in my mind as Theophany.
I read it as Theophany.
Theophany. That's better than Theophany. But anyways, yes.
Theophany.
Yes, it's interesting, and I agree with you. And like a supporting point for that too is Theophany even says, I assumed it would be your sister. You know what I mean? Like your sister, you know. So I definitely think Mira's path could get a little dicey, and she's meant for something.
It's just what has she been groomed? Because she doesn't know yet, right? But she has gone and reconnected with the family. I don't even know if that's the intention, right? Because they purposely cut them off. So we're digging for something here, and we don't know what, because Asher has been quite honestly a little bit more forthcoming in what we're looking for. The other question is, we now know Dane's dad is in their quarters, so they can't enter those quarters. What if some of that, you know, kind of nuggets is left behind in that housing that they can't enter right now?
That would be really interesting. I wonder with Garrett's new signet, would he be able to go?
Well, I think the wards, it doesn't matter because once you enter, you're still in a ward, right?
That is interesting. What is in there? I agree with you. It's something, but I just don't know what for Mira yet. And I'm hoping it's not just death.
So, I mean, that can't be a purpose. I mean, I guess it could.
It could if it's the kickoff for Violet something or another, which again like
you're
is
meant to die.
Sacrifice, you know, which has happened in other books.
Yeah, it has happened quite a bit of sacrifice. Interesting theory and thought, just while we're talking about sacrifice, I've seen the theory that Liam is still alive, but he is
interesting
because they have not confirmed they burned him. Remember? Violet's out of it. They didn't really tell us. So there's the thought that with his bones or something like that, that he could be Venin.
Interesting. He could be. I don't think that he's the brother, if we want to get into that. Well, maybe we'll get into that later. I don't think he's the brother that Xaden sees at the end, but I agree. I don't think there's any evidence to the contrary that he's not Venin. I don't think there's any evidence to say that he's not. So he totally could be. I think that would be an interesting way for the theories in the book and the story to go. If that were to happen, because I can't think of any reason where I'm like, nope, that's not possible of what I've read. So it could be possible. If that were to happen, I think it would be doubling down as more evidence that Venin can maybe evolve to a point where they don't lose all of their soul and they can still love. Are we going in that direction? Because even the Irids talk a lot about humans needing to evolve. Adarna even asks them, like, oh, are you saying that the cure is evolution? Like they bring up a lot of humans evolving. So I am wondering then if Liam is a Venin, would he be supporting evidence as well? Part of that plot line maybe that Venin, maybe there is no cure for the Venin. Again, I don't know. I kind of think Sloane siphoning power back into the ground could be a cure. I do believe that theory. But maybe where we'll go in the story is that there is no cure and they just evolve, retain more of their soul.
Well, there's the other theory, right? And the other question, which is, we're always talking about balance, right? Balance of magic is very important in this whole thing. One of the big ones that my sister actually asked me as a question when we were talking about this was, are Venin truly like evil? Are they truly, the perversion is the word she used, because we're always talking about the balance of magic. But what's interesting, right, is are we assuming that writers are not? And there was an
Mm-hmm.
interesting thing as I was rereading, and I believe it's in Iron Flame. It is at the top in one of the general correspondences during Iron Flame. And it says, in the hope and excitement this new development of the bonds between dragons, griffins, and their humans brings, I wonder, who has stopped to contemplate the nature of magic's balance? Do we not risk the equal rise of the very powers we seek to wield?
Yes.
And this is from, I'm going to absolutely destroy this, Nirali Illin, who was around during Lyra's time. So we're now saying, hey, maybe we're scared that this is going to bring other people, right? Were the Venin a response to humans bonding with dragons and wielding and griffins and wielding power they were not meant to wield?
I love that theory. I completely agree with you. I think they're the balance. I don't think that they're necessarily 100% just like the perversion of it. Because even when Theophany says, your mother was the response to me. And another thing too that I think was interesting is when Violet does go down and she has like a quick conversation with Jack Barlow, he brings up multiple times, I wrote this down specifically, but he says like, no, I have freedom now. He's like, what do you mean a cure? I'm not diseased, I'm free, is what he says. I'm free from a bond to a creature, which is like low-key rude to talk about dragons like that. He's like, I am now free. He's like, there's limitations to the physicality, but I am now free of a bond to a creature. So I just think it's really interesting that from their perspective, this is freedom. This is not, you know what I mean? So I think it's interesting in the balance of the powers, the tied to the power they get from the dragons, if Jack views it as freedom from a bond specifically to a dragon.
I see both points. I think that I have two challenges with it. Number one is when Jack is talking about this freedom, he also mentions the freedom from emotion, which we know is inherently right, not what we would want. So I think that's why I breezed over it, not to say that those other parts aren't relevant. They could be, and it could be easy for you to dismiss as a reader, or she wants you to dismiss it as a reader because he goes into talking about emotion and you're like, fool, no, you need to feel things, right? The second challenge that I have, right, and it could just be the types of people, right? Not all peoples are good or bad inherently, right? If we talk about real life, not everybody is good or bad. We have a little bit of both. So, you can't speak for all humans are bad. The challenge that I have is that when the Venin go to take over places, they don't just take the magic, they burn people, they burn towns. You know what I mean? There's a true like cruelty within it that isn't just at a power level that they could be, right? They could just chase the power if they wanted to. So something interesting to me is, are we saying that the leadership is just bad? And again, that balance is real, and we can't see past the fact that everybody has good and bad peoples in them. Because it's interesting to me that with this balance, right, and with Xaden getting a response to him, is the answer truly elimination?
Yes. Oh, so interesting. I love this because I have multiple points. Okay. I love this because I think that, I definitely think it's the leadership, like you said, because it's leadership on both sides.
Right.
There are terrible human leaders in this. And when they do go and they are cruel, the Venin, and they take the power and they burn the villages and they're massacring people. Literally, they do that to other people's humans in their political structure in the book. It's not like they've completely been able to not war with one another as humans. So it's like they are actually, there's evil in leadership on both sides. There's good in leadership, we know, in the human side. It's just, will there be good in leadership on the Venin side? We do not know. But I do think if Xaden can still love and retain part of his soul, if that's where the story could be going, it would be interesting to see, will there be Venin based on who become Venin that retain that part of their soul that are not wholly evil?
Right. And then you're talking about your Naolin, right?
Right?
You got your Naolin, you've got your Xaden, we've got Xaden's new brother, who we'll get into in a bit. I also think we've talked a lot about even Theophany. We can identify her as pretty much evil because she breaks her word. She does all sorts of things that are inherently negative. But she says quite consistently to Violet, I have the answers you seek. It's crazy to me that you won't just come to me and ask me these questions, right? So there are multiple times where, in that same line of freedom, where we're talking about answers and we're talking about things that we don't know and them having it. What does that mean, right?
It's very interesting. I had always assumed, there's probably more to it, honestly, but I had always assumed when she's saying that, and I'd be interested to hear your perspective, she knows the answer about what she wants for Xaden. She knows the answer of potentially what can Venom do to delay the transformation, or that's how I always took it, but I'm sure there's more to it.
Yeah.
And I'd love to hear your thoughts, because also we know Violet lusts, that's an intense word, but she needs information. Like, she's obsessed with details, information. She needs information to feel secure. So Theophany is definitely being seductive with her offer of, I've got the answers you seek.
Yeah. I think Rebecca has a way of telling us one thing, but telling us something else without us knowing, right? She makes us doubt ourselves. They always have double meanings, right? It's giving, stay with the High Lord.
Right. Yes, it is. It is. It is.
So I just think that there's more to it, right? I don't even know if we know what we want to know. If that makes sense. Like, what a convoluted way to say it. But when she's saying, I have the information you seek, that could be a lot deeper than what we're giving it.
Yeah, no, I agree. And it's also, this is side note, but like in mythology and other books and literature and stories, often when the protagonist is freed from a period of being kept in the dark or being lied to, we think it's the bad guy, but then the bad guy or girl is the one that quote unquote frees them because they give them that information that's been withheld from them. That happens in a lot of stories in mythology, that knowledge is freedom and knowledge is power. So I don't know. Again, like I agree with you. I don't even know if we know what we want her to tell her. But it's interesting that Violet needs details. She needs information to feel secure. And then this Theophany is saying, I have what you seek. And again, in most stories, it unlocks something and it's a freedom of some kind.
Yeah. And it's interesting because Rebecca's already kind of leaned into that. If you think about it, if we think about Fourth Wing and Iron Flame in their individual states, right? The rebellion, the wyvern existing, right? At each tier, it has been the same, but that betrayal or that darkness has been given to her by someone near her, right? So now we're a little bit above their pay grade. And what we can communicate. And we've also, again, throughout this book tour and some of the things she said, we know that Lilith and Asher put them on this path. There is a path out here of things that they know that we probably don't even know everything of yet, right? So it is interesting as to what light can be shed. But to your point, right, the Venom are going to give us something. It's not going to be, oh, I'm just pure evil.
It's interesting to see what is that they're going to give them. I also think it's going to tie into, which I would love to see, are we going to get into a study of the humans' nature? Because the Irids also call out that the humans have not evolved, they've not grown, they're still warring with each other. And then Indarna's even like, well, you know, that you're coming from a place of privilege, help us get this peace that you worship. But then they're like, nope, you guys have failed this test. So I think that it'll be interesting to see in book 4 and 5, like, are we going to get into this kind of like, what is the nature of Venom and their soul, humans, their capacity for evil? But that's why I think they're the balance to each other, because I think that they're going to have these like parallel paths. And I think it's going to be tied into Violet and Xaden's powers. Where are they going to converge, and like what is going to be this resolution of this war? You know what I mean?
Yeah. And getting back into balance power, we talked about it a little bit with Dane in the last part of this, which is, you know, does he create power, right? It's interesting because while we constantly talk about Violet being a lightning wielder, she's not a lightning wielder. It's interesting because even the Irids kind of identify her and say, oh, you gave her lightning, right? How much weight do you give the dragons and what they see in their power?
The Irids in their like seeing
because they look
the
at her
dragon's power.
Yeah, because they look at her and they say, oh, you gave her lightning. How reckless of you. And look at Adarna. I can't even believe what you gave her. And Violet hasn't even identified herself. So how much weight do you put on what they see?
I think that what we're led to believe in the book is that we should give it weight. Like, I think that we're supposed to disagree with their opinion of you've been reckless, but I think that they probably are seeing things for how they are.
So what's interesting about this, right? Yes. What's interesting about this and what I struggled with and battled with myself on was her being a lightning wielder, because I do call her lightning, right?
Mm-hmm.
Call it out. But you start to see people talk about, is Violet's power truly lightning, or is it power, the creation of power? We start to see this kind of on the Isles where there is no power. She's really brushing it off, but I think she could wield in no magic territory to an extent, right? If she knew how to do it. And something that I totally disregarded in Iron Flame until I went back through and read it is they tell us she is not a lightning wielder. So when she goes to Felix, so this is in Atria. God, I hope I'm saying that right. Atria. And she's wielding with Felix instead now because she can't work with Carr. And he's pretty much going on and on about how Carr didn't know how to teach her. They start talking about Xaden and his power and how she can get control because the concern is that she has no control. He says, you were never taught it. It's not your fault. It's Carr's. And she says, Xaden only moves shadows that are already there. And he says, Xaden can control and increase what already exists. It's why he's more powerful at night. No two signets are alike. And you create something that was not there before. You wield pure power that takes the form of lightning because that is what you're most comfortable shaping it as. Yes. He quite literally says, you wield pure power. It's only showing up as lightning because that's what you feel good about. So she moves on and continues functioning as a lightning wielder. But what Felix quite literally told her is she can wield power in any form.
Yeah, so it'll be interesting to see what happens in book 4 or 5 with her ability to do so, and will that expand? And isn't she's still able to communicate and have the bond with the dragons on the Isles that don't have magic?
Yes.
So,
and I don't think people talk about that being an Irid thing. I don't think that's an Irid thing. I think that's a Violet thing.
Yeah, no, me too. I agree with you. So it'll be interesting to see where does her pure power go. And it also is interesting because Theophanies, again, they do not match. Theophany is like,
yes,
mother was a match to me. They are not the balance of one another.
Exactly.
So it's not, Violet is something else. So she,
but if Dane is her balance, she would have to already be oh shit. Hang on.
Is Violet, I actually have a note in my phone, is Violet going to turn Venin?
Well, it's not even turn, right? Hang on, let's take a beat back. Why is her hair half white?
I'm assuming it's because of she was going to be dedicated to the temple.
And when she was going to be dedicated to the temple, that was part of the Venin process, wasn't it?
Yes, that's how you're right.
Theophany became. So what if she technically registers not as human and on the scale of power, right? What if she doesn't register as human? What if she registers on the Venin side?
That would be wild. Wild.
I didn't even think about that until you said he's the balance, and I'm like, but she's not. The balance doesn't predict. The balance reacts, right?
Right. So you're saying Dane can give power. Let's say, we're saying in this theory, that could be a second signet. Sloane can siphon it, and Violin is it. But she would be the balance, the opposite, matching in Dane's ability to give power by being powered, but a Venin. I think it's interesting that you say that, and I think it's going to be set up in book 4 or 5, because some of my notes that I wrote down is she going to turn? Because they again go into she would do anything for love, and like she would sacrifice, which again we talked about a little bit in that first episode of what would Xaden do. Xaden sacrificed himself to become Venin for her, Brennan and Neolin. But you're right. What if Violet is already
registering as Venin on the magic scale, right? And in what it's considering. So there's a couple thoughts here, right?
Oh my God, I have a thought. What if too, as a part of all of this, I didn't mean to interrupt, but I love your theory. Also, Taryn says, I know exactly who and what you are, Violet Sorrengail. Oh my God, I just thought of another one to your theory. Oh my God, Jordan, this is amazing. Darna says, I waited in my egg. She says it prettier than that, for 600 years. When was the war?
600 years ago.
And they thought they wiped out the Venin at the end of that war. And she said she waited 600 years for her. Exactly.
And also, since she stopped the process, is she not is she not evolution?
Yes.
Right?
She
in her
would
own
be
way.
the evolution.
Then this kind of feeds even further into my mirror theory, which is, again, we know she needs emotion to trigger it. This big catalyst for figuring out what this power is and actually kind of registering that she isn't a lightning wielder and that she is power is going to come from whatever happens with Mira. And it could happen, right? Let's get even ballsier on our guesses. It could happen on the Isles where she's not supposed to wield.
And then so she would know, like, she was like, oh, dang, I am able to wield. What is this?
And in this same thought, right? Let's keep digging in here. We know that the Venin have left the Isles alone.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
We know that
Why?
Xaden could wield his shadows on those Isles when he wasn't supposed to.
Yes, because
We know that royalty was fucking around with the Venins and kind of the hands-off war. And I think the king even makes a comment. Cortland, the king, and Xaden are kind of trying to barter here, right? And we're talking about the Venin, right? Because they know that they exist. And Xaden says, I'm assuming you know with our deal, trade would begin again, which I'm sure would be mutually beneficial since I'm sure you've heard we're in a war with the Venin. Should you decide to actually become our ally? And Cortland responds and says, oh, we've never involved ourselves with Venin. War destroys isles, blocks economies, supplying those at war. However, that's where the money is. We remain neutral in all things and always have. It's how we've grown trade, commerce, growth, and our knowledge for the world, no matter what god you worship or magic you can access. But then Violet says, but they've been here, right?
Mm-hmm.
Did you defeat them or cure them is kind of what she thinks. And he says, to imply that our isle is weak, conquerable, is in line you do not want to cross. Such an assumption is disastrous to an economy that is built on safe, stable trade. People do not invest in unstable isles. So he's telling us that they somehow managed to maintain neutrality with the Venin.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Because he knows they exist.
Interesting.
They're not treading on his territory. We know they can technically wield there because Xaden is able to wield.
Interesting. That's really
now he does seem shocked that they can wield, but I think he's shocked because he only knows Venin to be able to wield. It's interesting because they have an extreme interest in both Xaden and Violet, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Another note, kind of touching on what we said earlier, you will turn for love, right? You made that comment. This is before we knew Violet was a dreamwalker. So was this Xaden's dream? Was he talking to Xaden? Or was he talking to Violet?
Yes.
Because I think he might have been talking to Xaden at that point in time. He's saying, you will turn for love. He does, right? It would also come from personal experience if Berwyn, his sage, is Naolin, right? And they're chasing them to me, right? It feels like they're not chasing them to teach them. They're chasing them for answers. Or to push something forward, right? Because in my opinion, based on what we hear from the king, we've established that the Venin can technically coexist and not touch your land. You just have to have something to offer them.
Yes, I think that, like, from my perspective, I think that they want specifically Violet and Xaden's power.
Well, they're also after those hatchling grounds, or at least it feels that way. But in a lot of opportunities, they have only attacked the hatchling grounds to get something out of them, right? Xaden and Violet, not necessarily to conquer, because they knew that they would show up, right? So there's quite a few times they're chasing when they went to Atria's because a new egg hatched, making it a hatchling ground, giving power to the earth. They talk about that consistently, that these hatchling grounds give power to the earth back.
And then they can take the power. Okay. That makes sense of why they want to go there and what they want from there.
Feels a little important.
That makes total sense.
Like, could you give magic back to non-existent magic isles?
Yeah, I think that's in my note for where the eggs are taken. It's back to that. They were taken to the isles.
Either to the Irids or for trade, which again, everybody seemed to think that bartering in dragons was very scary. So unless the Empyrean gave them up, which they could have.
They could have.
The Empyrean are
their own thing. I thought, in my perspective, I thought they took the dragon eggs to the Irids.
Because we took 6, so that tells me one of every kind.
I think that the Irids are tied to it.
And we also have to think a lot of the isles don't want the power.
Yeah, that's true. They say that they're like
we're all set
here. Exactly. This is so interesting.
But I just think the only thing that bothers me the most about this is that they drove home. Asher wanted Violet to realize that they were dealing in dragons, that the Cravali were dealing in dragons, and that is why the Midnight Massacre happened. and they talk about this. So it really hasn't come up anywhere else, right? It hasn't, we don't
Mhm.
know why he wanted us to know that. And she was scared to know that, but it was very important to Asher that Violet understood that they were dealing in dragons and were unable to deliver those dragons. So there's a reason they want us to know that this was a deal on the table that they couldn't come through.
And how does that tie to the Venom?
It's a thought.
It's a thought. It's very interesting. Do we want to do who's the new initiate and then we can go into the rest?
Sure.
Okay. So I had to go back and reread several times on who I fully thought was the new initiate. I have several bullet points and sticky notes, etc. When I first read it, just the first time before rereading, I was so sure it was Garrick. But I have gone back and I've changed my mind, and I think it's Bodhi. Now, I thought it was one or two of them because Xaden says to them, "You've seen me struggle these past 5 months. How could you do this?" That implies it's someone very close to them. And the two people that would most likely know, other than Violet, everything that Xaden is going through is Garrick or Bodhi. And so then I was thinking, okay, where are their whereabouts when all of this is going down, right?
Where are you?
What is all of the things that are happening? And I had thought that I had read that Garrick, when he is physically exhausted from walking and basically like teleporting, that he touches the ground and then gets more energy. I wrote that down as a note my first reread. I have gone back and combed through this and I cannot find where I thought I read that. But what I did find is that Imogen comments on his pale, unusual pallor, how exhausted he is. He says, it's still not enough. I need to do more. But, so I was like, it's Garrick. It's totally Garrick. But I went back and reread again for notes. So this is the third reread. And there is, when Xaden is confronting Bernwyn and he sees Bernwyn, they mention an unconscious dragon, and then he sees his new brother. This unconscious dragon is a green dragon. Bodhi's dragon is green, and Garrick's dragon is brown. So I think that Bodhi was there with his dragon because, again, the dragon that then Bernwyn kills is a green dragon, and then we see in Imogen's chapter at the end, Bodhi's on his hands and knees and he's throwing up. That to me wasn't as much, to be honest, of like he's Venom because he's throwing up on his hands and knees. But the green dragon and you knew everything that I was struggling with. And then also I was thinking, okay, the only other person outside of Violet that really knew Xaden was struggling was Brennan, because he was trying to help. Like Brennan knew,
but not
about
for that
Xaden.
long.
No, and again, we talked about earlier last episode, Brennan's dragon is orange, not green. So I think it's Bodhi. Who do you think it is?
So it's interesting. The only reason I think another note is that Bodhi being on the floor retching, what if he's not throwing up? What if he's wielding?
Yeah, could be. Could totally
he's taking
be.
from the earth.
Could
the
totally
only
be.
thing to call out is they do tell us at the very end when Violet is coming to and is not really sure what happened is that Tarvis is missing. That is Garrick. Garrick is one of the missing riders. So there were missing 5 riders and dragons and eggs. Now, that's not to say that Garrick couldn't have gone with.
True.
Because I'm thinking, right, he is able to walk them places. So
yes,
we now have to get him away from the sage. I'm not convinced. I guess the question is, do you think that Xaden went with the sage, or do you think Xaden went to the Isles by himself?
Xaden went to the Isles.
Okay.
I don't think he went with the sage.
So I think that's important, right? Because how would you get there? How would you get away out of that situation? It's important to note that the dragon that is passed out is surrounded by 7 wyvern. Right? So now you have Xaden isolated. You have all of your people pretty much defeated. He's isolated by the sage. And now you have a dragon surrounded by 7 wyvern and another brother. So how did they get out of that situation is really the main key. Because we know he had to be able to find time to marry Violet. The other thought is...
maybe it is Garrick.
Right. But the other thought in line with Bodhi, right? Because I kind of go back and forth. Now, just because they left together does not mean one or the other is the brother. I agree that it has to be one of those two. We now know that Violet and Xaden are married, right? Xaden makes the comment at the end that, Siegel says, who's to say she'll do this for you? And he says, she promised, right? What did she promise him? She promised him when he was too far gone that she would take care of Trindor. Right? So his solution is marriage. It also might be how he keeps his soul with her, his path to returning. But my question is if Bodhi stayed behind, would Bodhi be the next in line, or would Violet? I don't know how the passage of power works, right?
That's
So
a
if
good
you
question.
remove
Yeah, I don't
Bodhi
know.
from the situation, Violet is now absolutely in power because they were the last living relatives.
Yep. And he does say it's all yours, which I think means a part of his soul, his love, but also his dukedom, like basically like his title and everything. Like I think it includes, we're going into a little bit of Horcrux territory.
My sister said this too.
I can tell you what I think. Like, yes, Violet is a little bit of a Horcrux for Xaden. So I think we're going into like love, soul, but I do also think, in a literal sense, it's all yours now. Which I do also think is evidence that Bodhi is Venin too, because he's like, well, Bodhi's a Venin, so
Yeah.
also it's all yours now. You got to be this last remaining,
And Bodhi makes it clear he doesn't want to lead. He wants to essentially stand by
Yes.
Xaden's side no matter in what capacity. So if Xaden becomes Venin and the only out is Venin, then Bodhi, I could see saying, well, me being your right-hand man is now in a Venin capacity, right?
Yes.
Then I guess my next question is, we present the question of, what happened in that time, right? My assumption or my guesses are, so, he pitches to Violet that he's going to take the dragons, work with the Empyrean to work with Tarn and the dragons to convince them to take these eggs to broker some sort of peace, right? Maybe give them to the Irids to learn from them so that they have the opportunity to change, right? Maybe that's it. Maybe it's to power the Isles. Maybe it's to broker that relation with, I think it was the Isle of Dune, and kind of pick up what the Cravali dropped, so to speak. So there's a couple options there. But he's clearly brokering his own mission for some sort of fix. And then you have, what happened with Taryn and Sigel? Is she still, are they still bonded?
Yeah, to me, it kind of sounded like she broke the bond.
So we know Taryn is asleep, or at least she says the bond is foggy as if he's asleep.
Mm-hmm.
So he can't be too far because she wouldn't feel it, right?
Mm-hmm.
There's also the thought of, did the Irids break the bond between Taryn and Sigel? And Sigel went with Xaden on this mission, and that was a part of the deal of what was left to forsake.
Yes, I think so. And I think that that's heartbreaking, and I'm not ready to read about them not being, like, that bond being broken. I'm not ready for that, and that is heartbreaking. But I think you're right also, because I think that it ties into earlier in the book when it's the password for the dad and it's the dragon's your first love. I think they clearly, at the end of this book, Xaden chose Sigel and Sigel chose Xaden again over Taryn. So I do think
or his plan.
His
I don't
plan.
think she would choose him over Taryn because, again, we've seen Taryn potentially betrayed by Naolin and what it meant for them to become Venin. We know that she's kind of gassed out Xaden during this time and not really wanted to talk to him. So it could be, did Xaden have a good enough plan?
Could be. It's interesting.
Especially with Andarna being back. Are you back?
We don't know. Yeah.
You were gone for like a couple days. Like, what are we?
Well, all adolescents that run away from home or say they're going to run away from home. She was back real quick. I hope she's back for Violet through this.
Yeah. I mean, it's just interesting to think of like what that means. Or she was just protecting her to make sure that, she didn't get burned, pretty much is what she said, or killed. I also think, we were given a very clear explanation as to what the cure is. The cure for the venom.
Not Sloane?
No.
What is it?
I think Sloane is an interesting thing, right? Sloane could channel magic back into isles that were rid of magic, right? A couple thoughts. Like, there's other things to do with that. But I think that the cure is in the temple based off of what Maven said.
Oh, yes. Yes.
So here is what Theophany says to us in, I think it's page 517, right? They're fighting. It's just Violet and Theophany, and she is trying to get a rise out of her. Violet says, I hold my neck straight when she appears 20 feet ahead. Tell me, do you miss Umbriel, right? Because she's now figured out that she was dedicated. And Theophany, her eyes flare and she startles. Victory, Violet thinks. I gathered more and more power, spooling it like a molten thread. Do you not yearn for the temple? I used the words the high priestesses had used on me. Her face twists with an emotion that looks like longing, but it's quickly masked with anger. Do you? She counters. Or are you immune, having only been touched but not dedicated, right? So we know she's not dedicated, just touched, in the same way that Theophany had been dedicated. She charges forward. Do you know the pain of never being allowed to return, of knowing that it would sever the very thing that has kept me untouchable all of these years? Her return to the temple would sever the thing that's kept her untouchable all these years. What is that?
Interesting.
To me,
her venonness.
To me, we've talked about what that would do.
Interesting. Oh, that would be really interesting.
Because they wouldn't refer to it as a cure, right? They tell us it's not a cure. They're not broken. Power is what's most important to her. It keeps her alive.
Exactly. And also, Aaric says guard the temple. There's a more immediate reason for why, but also what if it's a double meaning of guard the temple, because that could be a part of quote unquote cure or the sever. Yes.
Oh my God.
Very interesting.
And you're going to lead me into so many Aaric theories. Are you ready?
Okay.
Are you ready to segue out of here? Okay.
Yes.
Okay. So something that stood out to me, right, is the first time, the second he said guard the temple, I was like, oh shit. He can see the future, right? He sees things.
Yes.
It clicked, right? But then I went back and I started in my reread and paid a little bit more attention to him, right? So Xaden comes out of the meeting that makes him a duke, okay? He had no idea. At this point, Violet does not know, okay? But she had just given that speech to essentially dissolve the fight between the rebel and the loyalist. So she just dispelled it, and they're all talking about how Violet essentially says something fantastic, right? So then, so at this point in time, Xaden knows he's being promoted to Duke, so to speak. Violet does not know. They just saw her dissolve this disagreement between the loyalists, the rebels, and the flyers, okay? And they're talking about it, and Aaric says, do you carry news, or were you just gathered to see Violet's speech? She was quite moving. And Brendan says, oh yeah, we heard and saw. And then Aaric says, she'd be a great politician, or a general, or maybe definitely nobility.
Yeah.
And Xaden responds with that speech, at least a duchess. But what's interesting, right, is Aaric does not know, right? No, in quotes, that he has just become the Duke. So not only has he seen this outcome, but has he seen the outcome in which she is duchess and running things?
Interesting. Oh my God. Yes. Interesting. Maybe that is one of his outcomes that he's seen in Xaden's absence while they're figuring that out. What does it mean? My thing that I wrote down that I'm scared of about Aaric is when they're talking about, they're at that table, they're on the aisles, and then they're talking about hierarchy, heirs, thrones, and then they're saying like, basically like, oh, you're here. Are you interested in being the heir to the throne? And he says, no, my brother will be king, a bad one, but my brother will be king. I will fight in this war and most likely die. He does not say I will die. He says, but what if he had that ability way back then when he said that and he saw his own future? I cannot handle if anything bad happens to him. He is a side character I care a lot about. So that most likely better not happen.
So it's interesting you say that, because there's another thought that I had. So now we are in the argument with Corden, the prince, or the king, and Xaden's trying to essentially save Holden from himself. And also Panthers. And Xaden is giving a speech saying, your king kidnapped our asshole of a prince. But then he says, I wouldn't mind him staying here and annoying the shit out of you for the rest of his life. But that would make things difficult back home for someone I have, ... complicated loyalty towards. So I'm going to need the prick back. And Violet even acknowledges in this moment that it is Aaric. Now, are we making the assumption that it's just because of their tentative relationship? I think not. I think upon reread, how much does Xaden know about Aaric? And what has Aaric
Mm-hmm.
given him insight into? Is Aaric guiding him in some of his Venom
He could
relations
be. He
decisions?
totally could be. Interesting, because he definitely guides Violet. Like Aaric definitely guides Violet. So
Yes.
what is to say he's not guiding Xaden?
Yes.
What is to say not? Yeah.
I think he is playing a bigger role than we're really realizing. And I think whatever tentative relationship is happening between him and Xaden is happening maybe not on page for us.
Interesting. Oh, I'd love to know more. We got to know more in book 4 and 5. And then that also makes me think, what is his trajectory then if he's helping Xaden on the Venom side? It'll be very
Well,
interesting to see.
yeah, is he driving forward because his purpose is to
Mm-hmm.
solve it, right? He saw his
Mm-hmm.
father and his brother do nothing, so he cares.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
He's doing everything from a place of what we would consider honorable path, so to
Right.
speak. So what is he doing?
What is he doing? That is a good question. We shall see. I'm excited to see more in book 4 or 5.
Yes.
That's very interesting.
Okay. My next one that I have is that I think that Violet and Xaden are mates.
Oh my God. Yeah, I wrote that down. Literally, they say humans can't have mates. They're mates. They're totally mates.
Here's what I think, okay? Because I spent a lot of time thinking about how. Because first we get a lot of, again, we're getting all this peppered ideas thrown in.
Right, right.
Taryn mentioned it over and over again, kept calling her his
Yes.
mate. You have a bad choice in mates. And she even makes a comment, but he does not say yes or no, right? And I think that we've kind of identified that the dragons can sense things.
Yes.
What I think is they mention with the rebels getting the children that have the relics, that they knew that it would give them more power from the dragons, right? So they're gifted power from the dragons. We have Violet, who now has bonded 2 dragons, one who can manipulate magic, right? We know she's got multiple signets. We know she's likely not only been touched by Dune, but I even think we could go as far as to say she's been touched by Malik at this point in time. I think that whatever amount of magic is in their bodies that is not quote unquote human has created this bond to exist, and that they actually have a mating bond.
Yes, I completely agree with you. I wrote down why I think that they can have an actual mating bond is I think we could be going into a territory of they're almost like a second coming of the gods.
Yes.
So I think that it's not like when they clearly say humans cannot mate. They're totally mated. And they even, oh my God, because remember that point of, I thought Violet's second signet might be a little bit more about details or information or memories, kind of like Dane's, because remember she asks Xaden, how can I know that? Is that like because of the bond or something else? I think it's because they have a mating bond of their own. It's not just being bonded through their dragons.
You're talking about the mind reading, like you don't think his signet is increasing.
No, obviously it was not her second signet. We found out that that's not her second signet. Anything to do with that. So I think it's because they have a mating bond themselves, and it's not just their bond via their bonded dragons. And I think that is like the second coming of the 6 that walked before that were the most powerful. So when they say humans can't have mates, potentially, sure, I agree with you. It's because of the power that they have within themselves and the power that they're going to have through their trajectory. But I completely believe they're mates.
So it's interesting. So I do think that his signet is either growing too. I think there's 2 pieces, right? I do think that part of it might be this mating bond, but I believe there's another person, and I can't remember off the top of my head, and I don't think I annotated it, where he does essentially read somebody's mind. Now, something to consider, right, is we know that, again, that people with relics have 2 signets, but we also know that because of the way he bonded his dragon, he should have 2 signets. So should he not have 3 signets?
Dang, maybe he's coming for a third, yeah.
You see what I'm saying?
So it could be, yeah.
What if it's another form of intrinsic, or it's growing his intrinsic signet
abilities?
Right. I just think it's interesting there, because could he not have 3?
He could. Yeah, so it could be, because from my note, what I remember, it's almost like it was memory based. I wrote down it was memory based, and then I remember that's a Dane signet. It was not necessarily like she just straight up read his mind for my evidence of the mating bond, so to speak. Like,
right. Oh no, totally agree with that. Now, to reinforce your coming of the 6, right? We're told on page 84 of Onyx Storm. by Metario. He says, the last time a shadow and lightning wielder fought side by side, they managed to drive the venom back into the barrens for a few hundred years. We'll figure out how to do it again. I fumble the conduit and nearly drop it. Xaden and I are the first of our signets to live simultaneously since the Great War. So who do we think the big six are, right? We've got Xaden, Violet, Dane.
Garrick with the distance walking.
Garrick, Sloane. And I think the six is Imogen, right? Imogen or Bodhi?
I think there's going to be 7. So I think it's Imogen, and it's going to be Bodhi, because the ability to wipe memory, but then also the ability to be bound.
Riddick. I'm sorry, Riddick.
I don't think it's Riddick.
Okay, but
he can kill them by like touching them and freezing their
Yeah, he can control the liquid potentially in a body. Okay.
Yeah, okay. It'll be interesting because if Bodhi is the venom, if Xaden is, he could still be included in the 7, because there's going to be 7 now with like the 7th breed of dragon. But I can only imagine that Bodhi's ability to be the balance of any power that's from a dragon rider has to be important. So then I would think it's Bodhi and Riddick versus Imogen, but I definitely think Bodhi is included. I actually think Riddick might die. Sorry. That's one of my notes.
I do have fears. Oh, Aaric was one.
Aaric, yes, he has to be included in this. Yes, I agree. And because Violet even makes a point saying he's a real precog. Like, I think that will come into play later for sure.
I think there's an interesting point, which I think is what you were getting at when you said 7, right? Is that Rebecca gave us the 6 number to begin with. The 6 gods, the 6 types of dragons, right? The 6 most powerful. But what we're finding is there are 7. So is the 7 consistent? Who is the 7th?
What I think has to happen for them to come into their powers to be the second coming of the gods, or the 6 most powerful, now to be 7 most powerful, is there has to be some form of catalyst of like transformation of how they are as humans. So obviously we know what happens to Xaden, his transformation, his evolution, if you will. Violet, I think all our theories with Mira and everything that's going to happen, something is going to happen that's going to be her transformation or evolution. So something has to happen to them for them to step into this increase of power and be like this quote unquote second coming. I do have fears Riddick could pass away. So I do think that could be his transformation of like, in a way, it's rebirth in a way of he passes and something happens where he's brought back and he could step into that power. That's how I see him, but he is not my vote for the 7. So who did you tell me one more time? Your 6 that you were solid on.
So Dane, Sloane, Violet, Xaden, Aaric, and then Garrick.
I agree with that. Okay. So
now I do, Imogen. My 7th is actually Riddick, I think, and I can defend that in a second.
Okay, so yours then is Imogen versus Riddick, basically, or someone else to be the 7th.
Yeah, I just think is 2 things, right? Rebecca on this book tour has said she can't wait to see Riddick grow over the next couple books.
Okay.
That tells me you make it to book 5 somehow.
Yes.
Part 2 is that in this book, Rebecca did a significant dive of saying, everybody keeps brushing me off like I'm the funny one. Like I can't be fucking powerful. We're also, he's one of the few characters who we keep talking about their growth of their signet. In this book, we're really talking about Xaden's power growing. We're talking about Violet's power growing. But there's a ton of time spent telling us how much Riddick power is growing. In some of the things he can do and find, and that he doesn't know that other ice wielders can do it. So I think there's a lot of evidence here that she's trying to show us like, hey, what's he up to? He's getting kind of strong.
Yeah. If it's a Riddick versus Imogen, I definitely think it's Riddick. And it falls in line with like, I think he's been built up so much in this book. He's being built up for a fall. But I think the fall is transcending into power, because I think they all have to fall to hit into power. I don't think I think like, again, transformation, evolution, rebirth.
Like me saying Mira dying.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. Something has to happen to them that then sets them off into stepping into this elevated power. So I think that is more likely for Riddick. We are being set up for a fall, but I think that is going to be his step into claiming, and he's going to be one of the 7.
And I think we also know Bodhi's going to have a second signet. He was very sketchy about it, right? Violet asked him like, hey, do you have a second signet, or that I'm going to see you wield, or is it going to be a second signet that like or do you not have a second signet? And he goes, oh, I don't have one in the way Xaden doesn't have one, right? So that tells me he's some form of intrinsic, or something that could get him killed. But again, I think we're building up Bodhi as like his right-hand man, so I think his role lives a little bit differently.
Yeah, no, I can totally see that. Yeah, no, I agree.
Okay, my last theory is the objects.
Oh, okay, tell me more.
I just think, and I don't have a real concrete view on what I think it is. I've seen a lot of theories around this. I don't really believe any of them, but I do believe the objects we get from the Isle of Luck actually have meaning, because right away we're led to believe they don't mean anything, right? Now it's hard to say things like the slap, which was fucking hilarious, by the way. Watching Dan get bitch slapped was still funny. I don't care how much I love you. I laughed. Right, the arrow, some of those are hard to justify, but, and maybe in time we will, but the empty box is going to have meaning.
Oh, totally.
The compass
has so much
somewhere.
Meaning.
It has to. So I just think that there's got to be something more there. I don't really have a great baked theory on it, but I think it's something to pay attention to.
Okay. I love that you've segued into this. I love this. I completely agree
with
you. Yes, I think they all have meaning. One of my theories I wrote down is I think this compass at the Jack Sparrow Pirates of the Caribbean compass is going to direct Violet to finding Xaden and the eggs.
Oh.
Like, I think it's going to somehow, a compass is directional. Somehow
he's her true north.
Yes. I think that is where we're being teed up to go. Somehow she's going to be able to utilize it to be able to find him and where he's gone.
I could see that. It'll be interesting to see what some of the other things mean. To your point, broccoli. What do you bring?
He's gonna glow
table,
up.
Kitty cat.
He's gonna become a tiger. He's gonna be like a magical flying tiger or something.
For sure.
Yeah, for sure.
A familiar cat.
Exactly. And maybe Dane gets really spicy in the bedroom, and he likes that type of spicy play.
I can't wait, dude. It's going to happen. It's going to happen, and we're going to get to reap the benefits.
Yes. Okay, so I wrote down another note, and we kind of talked about this, so I'm just circling back a little bit, and it's Indarna's role in this. I think that they took the eggs to the Irids' land, where they are. I think that Violet is, because again, the Irids come to them. They make a point of saying that. They don't ever actually find where the Irids are.
Right.
So the compass is going to direct her to where they are, and that's where they've taken them. That's where they've gone. The compass is going to help her find it. I think Indarna played a big role in that. So while I think Indarna is quote unquote back, I think that Indarna now is going to play much more of
a liaison?
Almost like, thank you. That's the word I was going to say, because she wants this acceptance after the heartbreaking failure
of sad.
Oh my God, it was so sad. I teared up a bunch. And then also when she snaps at Taryn, and Taryn, they feel the hurt. Oh my God, I can't. Nothing. Taryn is my favorite character. If anything,
honestly, I told you I thought he was going to die, I think, in book 1. Remember that? I no longer believe that. I think that they've kind of teed us up to like keep, especially because with the bond broken from Indarna and them reiterating that he was the first. Exactly. I think we have to keep him.
That's her dragon. Yeah, exactly. Oh gosh, I hope so, because I love him. But then I think in book 5 or in the end of the series, she is going to be like, I don't know if her and Violet will be bonded again. I think she is going to be a force that helps Violet on this, but I do think she's going to play more of a liaison role, and she's going to have a big part to play in everything that's going to happen from here on out. The Venin, how this is going to pan out, second coming of the gods and the 7 most powerful. But I think that the bond is going to live, just like you said, with Violet and Taryn. But I don't think that they're saying goodbye.
I don't know that she truly broke the bond when she left. If she hit it, how she manipulated the magic, right? Because the fact that she was able to talk to her right away, unless everybody else is hearing her at the same time, which I doubt.
Well, can't Irids talk to anybody?
Okay. Yes, but in the part where we see her come back, she says, I won't let them burn you. And nobody else addresses that. Only Violet addresses that. Now, she doesn't talk about the bond, so it's really hard to say. I think the dragons actually might be a alliteration for how many gods she's been touched by. I think she's been touched by Malik as well. I think it's also why she was able to see Liam. It's one of two things, right? He's either in death and she was able to see him, or something to do with her dream walking, etc., where he is alive, right? It's got to be one of those two.
Ooh, yeah.
But it could be Malik showing his favor.
Interesting. Yeah, no, that could totally be true. If Liam is a Venin, which goes into the soul theory, I don't see Liam becoming truly evil, so I think he'd find a way to hold on to his soul, pieces of it. So if he is alive,
because he does
as
have
a Venin,
love. I think his love would be his love for his sister. It doesn't always have to be romantic love, but clearly with his notes and everything, the love he would hold on to, his tether would be Sloane.
So maybe he's alive and she walked into his dream but then would he be dreaming of her getting tortured?
Yeah. I mean, he would have been present with her. It could not even be dream walking. I don't even know, but
true.
I think there's the two options in my mind, which is one, he's alive and whatever was presented was some sort of, it could be his second signet. We don't know what his second signet was. And he had the relic.
True. Very interesting. Okay. Well, I would love to see him again if he's still alive.
It could just be false hope.
It could be false hope. I just don't see at the end of book 5, Sorrengail, Taryn, Andarna, Violet, and Xaden walking into the sunset happy schmappy. I don't think she's going to rebond with Andarna, but Andarna is going to help her.
My fear is more so they don't walk into the sunset because of whatever they do with magic, right? Because again, these are all answers to magic, responses, balance, etc. Is the answer that it only belongs with certain beings, and the balance isn't in the humans, right? Because the humans and the Venins and all of the war is the balance that all of the bonds break.
Could be. Oof. Ouch. But
you know what I mean?
Could be. Yeah, that's very true. And then that would kind of be the Irids' point when they're like, we don't bond with humans.
Yeah. No, that's assuming that the Irids are the right answer. It's hard to say. But I think we walk the line of, is everybody losing their power?
Whew, we'll see. And then also,
I would hate that. Is that wrong?
That would be terrible. But it also be, if it's an evolution, if the Venin don't need dragons, if they evolve and coexist and come together, maybe they don't need the dragons to have the power. I would not be happy if everyone just lost their power either. Yeah. But I'm wondering.
And that's an interesting thought, right? Because they can communicate, right? She could still have that relationship with Taryn and Sorrengail and still keep that in their own way. It would just look different.
Exactly. We shall see. I don't know. We shall see. So much to see.
I know.
That scene with Andarna and Taryn was probably the saddest.
Oh God, yeah.
Thing I've
and Violet, how she processed it, it was hard. It was a hard book for Violet.
It was.
She's slowly losing everything.
That's why. She had a major glow up.
That's also why I think the mirror thing is going to be the big thing, right? It'd be the final thing.
It would. Yep. And then that is her catalyst into goddom, basically, into the second coming of this. Yes.
Low key, Rhiannon's not making it.
Oh, yeah. Is it bad I don't have strong opinions? I'm like, I feel kind of bad saying that. Like, if
I don't really either.
Yeah, I know, I feel bad. I don't,
I'd rather Aaric live.
Totally.
Is that sad?
And Dane better live. But Dane is giving a power in life we think he's living. Yeah, he's living.
He's giving me life, that's for sure.
He's giving. Yes. He's amazing. He's amazing.
All right. Well, you heard it here first through the grapevine. If you like what you heard, please make sure you follow us on TikTok and Instagram at Sippin on Spice.
And we also have a YouTube channel where you can go and check out previous episodes listed, as well as just fun bookish content videos. So please go check us out and like and subscribe on YouTube.
Yeah, we hope to see you next week. Cheers.
Cheers.